Hey there folks, it's me, TheTacticalBrit, and it's no surprise that today I'm talking about the 5.2 update that's come to Battlefield. Now, I was away for a little while, but I also wanted to kind of wait just to play the thing extensively to truly get an understanding of what this update was, whether it was any good, whether the time to kill changes were as drastic as people have said they are, and really just try and get a feel for things. Now, before I continue this video, I just want to lay down a pretense. Now, I actually don't think that the time to kill changes are necessarily bad. I don't think they're the worst thing in the world. In fact, in some cases, I think it works really well. The thing I want to talk about, just very briefly, is the fact that I feel as though this update and this change that has been made to the game has been completely unnecessary. Like, I appreciate the developers are trying to accomplish things with the weapons that they're creating. I appreciate they're trying to create a certain level of balance. But ultimately, this is an update that didn't really need to happen. It was a change that didn't necessarily need to happen anytime soon. And I think the way it's been executed and the way they've gone about it is something that was natural to cause community backlash. You had a community that was hell-bent on keeping the time to kill they already had. And it just felt like an unnecessary change in the context of things, and I think that's just something I wanted to lay down before I continue this video. But with that said, this update has happened, and this update looks like, in my opinion, it's going to be sticking around for the permanent basis of the game. I don't think there's going to be a revert on this. I personally don't think there needs to be, if I'm honest. There's some things that definitely need some work, but ultimately I actually don't feel as though this change is as drastic and, mind-blowing and crazy as people are making it out to be. So let's talk about this update, and I think ultimately it is just a reshuffle and some change. I think change in some respects in a way that needed to happen. I think Battlefield 5 was starting to get very entrenched in certain weapons just being superior than anything else in the game. And I kind of like the fact that this has reshuffled that deck. Some weapons are now seeing a little bit more airtime, and I've used guns that I haven't previously tried using before. I'm reusing some older weapons, and it feels like things are working in a lot of senses. For example, I'm using the semi-auto rifle Gewehr 43 a lot in this video today, and I actually felt as though I was getting kills on people with assault rifles and LMGs and stuff because I was playing at my engagement range. It felt as though some of the balancing changes in some respects have really supported some weapon classes and have allowed damage over range to really become a pretty strong factor in what you should be considering to do in order to start engagements. The Gewehr 43 is a fantastic example, the AG42. There are plenty of sort of semi-automatic rifles that do this kind of damage over range, like the Kraben, that are really great and have received an update here in the sense that they now have a bit more of a chance at these ranges because they're no longer being laser beamed at distance by other enemy weapons. And with change comes complaints, and I think this is probably one of the most potent things, is that most people have just logged on, they see the guns that they used before, maybe the FG42, and they don't want to change. And because they don't want to change, I think a lot of people are just crying about the fact that they have to switch weapons. I think Reddit is especially a enemy of this, so to speak. These are the kinds of people who play the game for hours upon hours, and they invest in the game. But it also means they're the kinds of people that know that certain guns that they use will melt other people in most situations. So the second the developers shook those around, suddenly everybody on that website seems to be very upset very quickly. Which is no surprise to me, if I'm perfectly honest. But it certainly does feel as though there is much more diversity here. I'm feeling as though automatic assault rifles are working within their intended ranges. I'm feeling as though SMGs and semi-auto rifles are working with their intended ranges. And that was the kind of change I actually wanted to see. I was getting tired of being killed by SMGs 50, 40, 60 meters away. These are the kinds of guns where you should close the gap. But the thing is, I have very rarely killed somebody with an SMG in close quarters, just because they get to me first. Like, they will always finish me off first before I have a chance to take them out. And, to some degree, I think that's working incredibly well now. And really, if I stop dancing around the wording, I'm actually pretty okay with the time to kill changes. In fact, I'd say I like them in a lot of situations. I think this game needed a serious rebalance and understanding of how certain weapons work at certain ranges, and I felt as though the game had clinically stopped players from playing aggressively because you just get killed at range so often. Like, if you want to run from a trench to a trench, you had no chance because most weapons up to 50 meters could completely decimate you. And I'm so glad that we're now in a game where you can actually bounce around locations quite a bit, even absorb a shot or two, and, you know, have a chance to fight back. That's not something I think we've seen before. And I think it's really a testament to the change that's been made that this hasn't affected people with higher skill. Like, I play with a lot of people on my friends list who I know are good players, some people who are running clans and whatnot. For those of you who are familiar with the Broken Machine, he's a fantastic Battlefield player who plays on console. I've watched some of his stuff. He is excelling as he normally was. And for those of you who watch my content, you'll know that I play pretty well in most situations. I do my best to top the leaderboards every time I play. And I like to play pretty explosively and position myself in aggressive locations. And I haven't struggled at all, because I'm just constantly aiming for the head. I'm getting those chest and head shots that are making the difference. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't found it to be a problem. I think most people... When I actually first played it, I didn't really notice much of a difference until I fired over range. It was only once the range had kicked in had I realized that much had actually changed in that scenario. Now, that's not to say that this patch is perfect, though. You know, I totally understand there are some weapons that are just downright ridiculous now. Like, the FG42 just doesn't make sense, you know, it should be more lethal. And I think this kind of highlights a problem I want to talk about. The Battlefield and DICE need to understand that there are more ways to balance weapons than just rate of fire, recoil, and damage. You know, it feels as though they're trying to do damage over range now, which is great, but they also need to start introducing things like, you know, muzzle flash and heaviness of weapons, weapon mobility. These are the kinds of things that if you add more diversity, you're going to notice that people are going to recognize it. Make MMGs heavy to carry, make LMGs lighter than MMGs, make SMGs the most mobile and quick device on the field, and then suddenly you've got this very drastic mix-up of weapons where people can understand how individual ones work. And I think it's this lack of change and this lack of understanding with these weapons that is hurting the game in a lot of places. Say, for example, an anti-material rifle. People would be less inclined to use the things if they were really heavy to lug around in comparison to a sniper rifle. And I think some of these changes and more abilities to diversify weapons is something that's going to help, because it's clear that DICE didn't understand how to balance the FG42. They saw, you know, an LMG that had high caliber ammunition in it with 20 bullet magazine, and it's basically a pea shooter over range. In fact, some SMGs even do more damage than it, which doesn't make any sense just by looking at the weapon or the weapon class that it's in. Make the FG42 the lightest machine gun for support players, give it a reasonable amount of damage, and suddenly you've got a trade-off between magazine size and mobility. And stuff like that is going to be helpful when they introduce DLC weapons in the future too. So examples like the FG42 and some of the SMGs clearly illustrate that this needs some work and tweaking, and some guns do need some changes to them. I really do feel as though this is a patch that could have worked though, and honestly I kind of wish they sort of ghost released it and didn't actually tell anybody they were changing anything, and then saw what the community felt, because I feel as though the second the word TTK change was branded on this patch, it was destined to be backlashed by the community anyway. I don't think a lot of people realize, in fact, that the changes that have been made are going to create a great part of weapon diversity in the future for Battlefield 5, especially with some of the upcoming weapons that we've seen in data mines, such as the Grease Gun and the Type 2A. These are the kinds of guns that are going to need a diverse range set, and not just to feel like other weapons that are already there. You know, there are situations where we need weapon diversity to be a thing, so people are trying stuff new, because I can guarantee you, if you were looking at the Pacific DLC, the only guns worth using in that patch prior to this update was the Jungle Carbine and the Browning. There was nothing else, and it was a complete waste of two weapons. The M1 Grand was useless. Now the M1 Grand is a 3-shot kill machine, and I think it works pretty well as a CQB assault rifle / semi-auto. As for the rest of the changes made in 5.2, things like spotting is just downright broken. I'm really disappointed that they released this in this update. I feel like I'm constantly spotted. I feel like I'm constantly spotting people. I don't think it's of benefit to the game, and I think this is something that needs a radical rethought. Either just disable it completely until it's completely fixed, or just don't let it be a thing. You know, I think a lot of people will collectively agree that this is just there's no grey area surrounding spotting. They just simply got it wrong in this update, and I hope they do revert that. But ultimately, this is probably the best I've enjoyed Battlefield for a while, and I'm not really that upset about the time to kill changes. I really feel as though Not enough people gave the game a chance. I don't think not enough people tried different weapons and tried to diversify a bit. I think people just picked up the FG42 and went, yep, the gun I used that melted loads of people doesn't work anymore, so screw this patch. Similarly with the STG-44, similarly with some of the other weapons that were nerfed, but there were lots of other weapons that received buffs as well, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. And there are some statistical imbalances, you know, it is safe to admit that there are some weapons that have been tweaked way too much and need some changes, but not every gun's going to be perfect, and there are going to always be some superior examples. Pistols also need a lot of work because they surprisingly do a lot of damage now over range, which they shouldn't do. But again, like I said in the backdrop to all of this video, this is just a change that didn't really need to happen. As much as I think it's okay and actually pretty good in some places and can be even better, it just didn't need to be a thing. It's just causing problems for no reason. Like, just leave it alone. There was no need to change a core structs of the gameplay now, when things were going so well. I would have been just as fine and happy with the old TTK as I am with the new one, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I think the average gamer Joe on Reddit and the average gamer Joe who's playing perhaps doesn't either realize that this is for a good cause or doesn't seem to want to care either way, so it's just one of those things. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Feel free to disagree with me, you know, this isn't just some random video of me being like edgy and saying, no, that thing that everybody hates, I actually like it. That's not the case at all, you know, this is really just like a video expressing my feelings after playing it for a couple of days now. I'd say about 4 to 5 days I sunk my teeth into the patch, and this is what I came up with. But yeah, feel free to constructively disagree with me in the comments. I want to hear what you guys think. What is it that makes this so wrong for you, or what do you actually like about this update? But anywho, folks, thank you for watching this video. I will catch you in the next one, which will be very soon. It's been me, TheTacticalBrit, signing off.